Hi, I'm Dylan Cox and this is my Sunday results wrap-up. First place to start is obviously the one. Floyd Mayweather Jr. beats SAUL Canelo Alvarez in a monster fight from the MGM Grand in Las Vegas last night. He wins by a majority decision. Majority decision? Did you say majority decision? A majority decision. One judge, CJ Ross, we know her from the Pacquiao-Bradley fight. She scored that a bit crazy. She scored the fight 114 to 114. 114 to 114. 114. 114. 114 to 114. A draw. The other two judges seem to have it right. 117, 110. I think one had it 116, 112. But I had it even wider than that. I only gave Canelo a round. But you could argue the odd round here or there when Floyd took his foot off the gas. But a draw, that is a shocking score. And that's going to overshadow Floyd's great performance because he did an excellent job last night, frustrating Canelo, of making him miss and making him pay. And that's what Mayweather's great at. And he looks sharper and quicker than he has done in a lot of his last few fights. So Floyd Mayweather is back in business. The weight limit for this fight was 152 pounds. And a lot of people were saying, oh, it's all in Floyd's favour. The weight limit for light middle is 154. But Canelo is a big guy at light middle. And he had to take off those extra 2 pounds, and he looked really drawn, really drawn at the weigh-in, like skinny, skeletal. Whereas Mayweather looked his normal self. He weighed in at 150.5, right? And then he goes after the fight to Jim Gray from Showtime. Shout out Jim Gray, great job. Yeah, I don't even like you, dog. That's James Toney impression for you. Go and check that fight out when he just loses it with Jim Gray. Great. He goes to Jim Gray after the fight. I weighed from 146 on the morning of the fight. Now, I don't know how many people believe that because there's a lot of rumours that Floyd just says these sorts of things to make him sound like he was at a disadvantage, and a lot of people believe he actually weighs 156, almost 160 on fight night. I don't believe that at all. I think what he's saying is pretty much true. I think Floyd is a happy, comfortable welterweight who chooses to fight at light middle for these bigger fights. But those 2 pounds did make a difference in terms of Canelo having to lose that weight, drain himself off for the weigh-in, and obviously struggle through that process in his camp. But that doesn't make a difference to the outcome of the fight because it didn't matter if Canelo fought at 154 yesterday or not. He just couldn't get close to Mayweather. And one of the things you'll notice is that Canelo is getting frustrated so early in the fight, like really early in the fight. He was just looking so ponderous because he didn't know what to do. He was hitting thin air for large portions of the first few rounds, and I think Mayweather was just having fun there, flicking out the jab, finding his range with the jab, and then boom, some of the right hands were coming in, and then he showed his repertoire of shots. Interestingly, he said after the fight that he'd like to have thrown more combinations, and a lot of people thought that this was a boring fight. Now, it's boring to a casual fan who's coming to watch this big event and it's been hyped up and they're not getting the slugfest that they expect. But to a hardcore fan or a purist, this was a punch-perfect performance by Floyd, and he looked great. He looked as sharp as he ever has done, and he looked quick, and he looked nimble, and he just looked like he was doing it at a canter. Spencer Fearon, shout out to you, Spencer. You called it right. You said it was going to look like a glorified sparring session, and that's exactly what it looked like. A couple of reasons why Floyd looked so good and made it look so easy was that A, he's been more active than he has done since 2007. So since coming out of that retirement, he's only been fighting once a year or less, and now he's fought twice in the space of, 6 months. So he fought in May against Guerrero, back in there in September against Canelo, and he's going to be back out in May according to him. So this is great. He's keeping ready, he's staying in the gym. 2, he's back with his father. Now, this may be a bit controversial. Uncle Roger gets all the credit for some of his fights in the past because he was working with him. But when Floyd was with his father, before Roger took charge, a lot of people said that Floyd, down at super feather and lightweight, was a bit of a boring fighter. He was safety conscious and all this. But that's what he was last night. And that's what Floyd Mayweather Sr. has always preached to his son. He's a more defensive fighter. And a lot of the credit for when Mayweather was looking very aggressive against guys like Gatti and more recently against Cotto was because Uncle Roger is a more offensive type of trainer in comparison to his brother Floyd Sr. Another reason was he was in with a guy that he genuinely thought could beat him, and he stepped up his game. Where did Floyd go from here? He seemed to win at a canter last night against arguably his toughest test in around 140 to 154. There's not any other bigger names than Canelo really at the moment that you think can challenge from, unless Sergio Martinez decides to come back down to 154. But even then, he's on HBO, and that would be a tough fight to make. And Martinez is getting old now. Well, on the undercard, Danny Swift Garcia caused a bit of an upset against Lucas the Machine Matisse by beating him by unanimous decision over 12, and that was a very intriguing fight. And Garcia stuck to his boxing beautifully, and Matisse's eye was shut early in the fight. In those last 2 rounds, he seemed to be landing some big shots and hurt Garcia a little bit, but Garcia stuck in there, stuck to his boxing, stuck to his game plan, and came away with a fantastic win and proved a lot of people wrong. And it'd be interesting to see if he gets the fight against Floyd next in May. Floyd's now going to be going into his third fight in this 6-fight Showtime deal. So he's going to hopefully fight again May, September next year, May, September in 2015. And if Khan beats Alexander in December, which that fight is pretty much on now, I think, we'll see if Mayweather takes the winner of that maybe in the September of next year. People are talking about him coming to the UK to fight Khan if that fight ever happens. I don't see that happening. A, because Richard Schaefer has talked in the past about the tax situation and Floyd, whether he can get exempt from the full amount of tax he would have to pay in the UK, and that's a big part of whether he'll come over here or not. But he makes so much money in the MGM ground. The MGM's his home, and I can't see him sacrificing A, home ground, and B, all the money he makes in the MGM to come to England to fight Khan. Interestingly, Mayweather said this morning, or at the post-fight press conference earlier in the morning, that he may have dislocated his elbow during the fight, and that's why he felt he couldn't get off some of his combinations. He looked pretty sharp to me. He didn't look like he would have dislocated his elbow to me. He did miss with one wild shot in the fight that may have caused the dislocation, but he said he toughed it out when he looked at his kids in the crowd. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but if he was carrying a little bit of an injury, more power to him for doing so. But he did say that he wanted to throw more combinations, and we didn't see as many combos as we've seen in the past. But he still brought into the right hand into good effect, and he brought the uppercut in as well, which was a beautiful shot. And he just boxed Canelo's ears off. So it was a great spectacle.